Footy Journals back here at the Newcastle United training ground, where Eddie Howe's just done his pre-match press conference ahead of the New Year's Day trip to Liverpool. Tough game for Newcastle United, particularly after 2 consecutive league defeats, 6 defeats in 7 in all competitions, and against the team Newcastle haven't beaten at Anfield in the Premier League since 1994, and Eddie Howe's lost his last 11 games against. So yeah, all that negativity out the way, Jordan. What did Eddie Howe have to say?
Well, should we start with the injuries
as
first? Yes, we always start with injuries. It seems like the go-to place. It's usually the first question of the press conference as well. But yeah, a typical Eddie Howe update on injuries. Very coy on Jamal Lascelles. Did say that he hopes, well, the club think that it isn't a long-term injury, believe it's short-term. Hope to get him back soon. He was then asked if he could be back for Liverpool. They said wait and see. So yeah, open as always on that one. And he was asked specifically about Harvey Barnes and Joe Willock, and used the term no immediate update. So yeah, the last time we got a time scale off Eddie Howe, it was January time, and when they would be back. Spit me marbles out there. So yeah, Harvey Barnes at the moment is still due to be back sort of mid to the end of January, and Joe Willock as well, I imagine, is the same.
There's a bit less certainty on Joe Willock, because Eddie Howe initially said when he suffered that setback with his Achilles, not short term, it's weeks rather than months, but now it is approaching months. So yeah, we'll wait and see what happens with that. I thought the wording of Eddie Howe's answer regarding Barnes and Willock was interesting, because he did actually say back from injury, but obviously no immediate updates on them. So we'll wait and see what's happening with them. And then Jamal Lascelles, obviously doubts, but importantly, I wouldn't expect any fresh injury updates from Eddie Howe, but no immediate concerns by the sounds of it. And Joe Linton, positive to see him back against Nottingham Forest, and Eddie Howe spoke very highly of him. Could be back in the starting 11 even against Liverpool on Monday evening. So yeah, bit of positive news on the injury front. Amid a very difficult injury situation for Newcastle United.
Yeah, I think once you get Joe Linton back in that start 11, I think if you look at the team that started against Forest, it probably is Newcastle's strongest 11, bar some fans probably put Livramento at left back ahead of Byrne, and then maybe Joe Linton in the midfield ahead of Lewis Miley. But again, fans might argue that would be ahead of Sean Longstaff, given that he struggled when he's returned from injury. So I think that's why the defeat in Nottingham Forest was so disappointing, not just because it was at home, but because Newcastle, for the first time in a while, genuinely put out a strong team, and for, you could probably say, 35 minutes of that game played well, but then obviously tactically were undone by Forest's attacking players. So I'd imagine Joe Linton probably will come straight back in against Liverpool, to be honest, Tom. I think the easy person to take out is probably Lewis Miley. But as I say, if you get Joe Linton back,
he was probably one of the better players.
He was, and it was Isaac and Miley who I thought were the two standouts against Forest. But as Eddie Howe has hinted at with Miley several times, he wants to protect them and manage his minutes, the terms he's used. And Sean Longstaff is a player that has, notoriously performed quite well under Eddie Howe. Bar, as I say, he's going through a difficult little period at the moment, but I suppose the same can be said for many other players as well, which makes the game against Liverpool huge. And Newcastle need a reaction on the back of 3 straight defeats.
Yeah, if you include the Chelsea game.
3 straight defeats, then lost 6 of the last 7. They need a reaction, and the last place you want to go to, Dom, Liverpool. You mentioned the stats there.
Yeah, their home form is very good. I don't think they've lost. It's been around a year since they've lost a game at Anfield in the Premier League, and again before that you go back to COVID times. So yeah, it's been a really tough place historically for Newcastle to go, and Liverpool just seem to have Newcastle's number, even when it looks like they're going to win a game or even get a point, as it was at Anfield last season. Probably deserved all 3 and they end up coming away with nothing. Against Liverpool at St James's Park back in August, looked set for 3 points against 10 men, 8 minutes of normal time to go, and they end up losing that game 2-1. I still struggle to see how that happened, but just shows how dangerous Liverpool are and the changes they can make during games. And Jurgen Klopp's style as a manager just seems to bring out not the worst in Newcastle, because I always think the standards and the performances are quite generally quite good against Liverpool, but it almost brings out just moments of chaos from Newcastle. Even you go back to the 2-0 defeat at St James's Park earlier in the year, back in February, where I think Newcastle outplayed Liverpool with 10 men for large periods of that game, but found themselves 2-0 down and a man down within 20 odd minutes of playing. So again, the result was pretty much over at that point. But yeah, I'd expect a performance from Newcastle, but probably not a result is the best thing I could say. Just the form book, history, everything sort of points to Newcastle not getting a win. But you never know. If there was a time for Newcastle to get a win and get things back on track, breaking that hoodoo at Anfield would go some way to doing that, and be a big catalyst and platform going into what is shaping up to be a really sort of grueling, decisive derby game in the FA Cup against Sunderland at Sunderland in a week's time, just over a week's time.
Yeah, it's creeped up on us.
It comes up really quick. And just a question I posed to Eddie Howe was based on comments that Jurgen Klopp made about his side previously. Said they played exceptional football in that win against Manchester United. Where
rare praise from Jurgen Klopp.
Yes, he even said it was rare praise. And it's strange because that happened this month. That 1-0 win, and at that point Newcastle were the informed team in the Premier League. No team had picked up more points since Champions League football had started, so between September and the start of December, than Newcastle United. It's just since then it's dropped off a cliff. And I asked Eddie, how do you have to look back at performances like that, where largely the group of players very similar? I think only Nick Pope, which you could argue is a massive miss, but only player who is unavailable for Liverpool, who played in that game against Manchester United. So yeah, Eddie Howe pointed to that performance and said it was the best performance of the season, and it seems a long time ago, but ultimately it's not. So it's about getting those levels where the players seem to have that extra yard of fitness and seem to run that bit more and show that extra quality and pressing and things like that, all the characteristics that have got Newcastle so much success over the past 2 years. And yeah, the fact it's only less than a month ago that happened is a sign for encouragement, maybe, but Eddie Howe couldn't really give the answers of how you get back to those levels. He just said, we need to. So, yeah, easier said than done, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at that performance against Manchester United, and then Newcastle at the time, I think, were at the start or even in the middle of playing the same start 11 for, I think it was 5 or 6 matches
those were Klopp's
in a row.
Klopp's comments were based on.
So I think to the argument of fatigue is a genuine one, but I also think in many ways as well, I think that argument is growing a little bit tired, and that's why I think Newcastle now need a run of results. And I think in many ways it probably will get worse before it gets better. I mean, you look at January. January is brutal. Starts at Liverpool, you then go to Sunderland in the FA Cup. Aston Villa's in there. I think Newcastle got a home game against someone in there as well. It's a winter break actually, but I mean, in terms of the calibre of opposition that Newcastle play, I think in the month of January, there's potential that they could go and lose more Premier League games. And I think why January will be such a defining month, and I've said this several times, I think that Sunderland game, they have to win that Sunderland game, because as I say, the games that follow after that, or even the games that have followed before that, it's a lot of negative results in there. So I mean, if you lose to Sunderland, you need an even bigger reaction than what they need right now. And you know, the fixtures that they've got to play as I mentioned there is pretty brutal. But it's so difficult, the games they've got.
Yes. Ultimately, Newcastle are going to go into the next 3 Premier League games as underdogs, and if they lose all 3, they could quite conceivably be in the bottom half of the Premier League with less than half the season to go. So yeah, it paints a bleak picture, but still 9 points up for grabs in those games, so you never know. And Newcastle can often surprise you in the right ways, in the wrong ways, as we've found out recently, but yeah, you just never know. And I think part of Eddie Howe's answer to my question, just going back on that, was almost defending himself a little bit, just like, let's not overreact. Look, a few weeks ago we were playing our best football of the season, so let's look back at that. And he did certainly dwell on the way his team played against Manchester United, rather than the praise from Jurgen Klopp. And Eddie Howe was asked a few questions about sort of feeling the pressure and the criticism that is understandably growing from outside, and I thought Eddie Howe's responses were quite pragmatic, Jordan, and quite measured.
Yeah, I thought Eddie Howe faced up to the questions very, very well. I think there's been a lot of there's been a reaction in the fan base, as you would expect after the Nottingham Forest game. I said after the game it was pretty pitiful, to be honest. It was I call it Newcastle's worst performance, or certainly result under Eddie Howe. Just certainly because of the level of opposition, if you like, on paper, and also because they were at St James's Park. So I understood the anger and frustration after that game, but I also think what Eddie Howe was sort of alluding to in his comments is, you know, these, in many ways, he shouldn't be wrote off, and these group of players shouldn't be wrote off, because this is I suppose you can call it a blip. I know it's 6 defeats in 7, but this is probably the worst spell that Newcastle have had under Eddie Howe. Yep. So why all of a sudden, for all they've achieved in the last even probably last season and the season before that as well, when they've done so well to stay in the Premier League, why all of a sudden are the question marks over the group of players on the manager? Again, as I said, I get it. It was Boxing Day wasn't good, but I think there should be a little bit of belief there that Eddie Howe and this group of players can turn it around. And I think, you know, the term that we've been using is there's lots of credit in the bank. It can quickly be lost, but as I say, me personally, I do think Eddie Howe and this group of players is the right man to turn this around. It might get worse before it gets better, but I think the group and Howe deserves time, and I think probably the owners, in many ways, like Amanda and me, I'd probably say it that way as well. I'm sure he's got the full support and backing of the owners, and will be given time. Look, we might be having different conversations a few months down the line, but I think for now, there's no reason to doubt this group and Howe, as I mentioned.
Yeah, but Eddie Howe, on the same side of things, he did say he understands the frustration, because ultimately in football you're held to account on a almost a quite short-term basis, really. I mean, last season's gone now. Like, Newcastle will need results here and now, and Eddie Howe and his players will be held to account based on that, particularly by supporters more than anyone, and the press in some ways as well, which Eddie Howe was asked about quite a bit. He said he sort of blanks out the negativity, is only sort of coming together with the negativity or any criticism is if he, on a match day potentially, or in press conferences where we pose questions to him, some difficult ones, some slightly easier ones, but he sort of said in kinder words, he doesn't care what we write, doesn't care what we do. If we didn't exist, he'd probably be a happier man.
He would. He wouldn't have to face up on a Friday and then every other midweek as well with all these European games. But yeah, he pretty much said that he doesn't listen or read what we write. But to be fair, he probably isn't the only one. Sure.
Check out Shields Gazette, Newcastle World, please.
Shameless plug there. We had to put that in.
Eddie Howe won't. So.
No, he definitely won't. He doesn't read Newcastle with all the Shields Gazette, or maybe he would be in too harsh.
Maybe he's a subscriber, Eddie.
Yeah, maybe. Right. Anyway, we've gone off topic there. Yes. I'm trying to think of other topics to discuss.
Moving on to January. I think,
let's go on to January, which was.
Obviously no updates from Eddie Howe, but you can read between the lines of some of the things he said.
Go on, Dom, take it away. What did Eddie Howe say when he was asked about January budgets?
Well, he said, what got alarm bells ringing for me, he just said no assurances in terms of there being money to spend in January. And when going off the things you hear sort of behind the scenes, is there money to spend in January? Yeah, I'm not sure. So whether Newcastle are actually going to go out and address problems that I think probably do need addressing, in terms of maybe getting a third choice striker and bolstering that squad, getting a right winger in potentially, and maybe another centre back as well. I think it's going to be tough for Newcastle to tick all those boxes. They're probably going to look at the loan market, where Kalvin Phillips sort of fits into that, but based on the sort of loan fees we're hearing that Newcastle would have to pay to loan him for half a season, Newcastle could well distance themselves or try to push a far lower fee, where it's between, I think, £7 and £8 million.
Yeah, that's
Manchester City would be looking for, which to be honest, based on a financial fair play aspect for Newcastle. Is that money better spent on a permanent signing for a player who could bolster the squad in terms of in an attacking sense, because Kalvin Phillips could be that midfield bolstering, but how fit is he after a lack of football this season and last season really, and a history of niggly injuries as well? And is paying £7-8 million for him for half a season the best course of action? I'm not sure. I think that's something Newcastle will assess. It's not a deal they'll do immediately if they do end up doing it, but yeah, the fact Eddie Howe said no assurances over any money to spend and sort of said January is a difficult month. January is a difficult month, it always is, but his first January window, he said the same thing, it was a difficult month, but they went out and got the players they needed and ultimately achieved the goal of staying in the Premier League. Now the goal's very different. They sit 9th in the Premier League, a lot more competitive at the top end of the table, and really he talked about the aims. Minimum expectation for Newcastle this season after finishing 4th last season, the absolute minimum is keeping European football alive and playing in it come next season, whether that's Conference League, Europa League, outside chance of Champions League. They need to do it, and sitting 9th in the form they're in is things are looking a little bit shaky, and I think January would present a good opportunity to address some of those issues and freshen up the squad slightly. So I was slightly concerned by the way Eddie Howe answered his question based on no assurances, money to spend, January's difficult, not going to be particularly busy, things like that. Hopefully he's just been typical Eddie Howe, coy and keeping his cards close to his chest, but yeah, based on everything we're hearing at the moment, I'm a little bit worried going into January, that's all I'll say.
It depends.
Here's my fear.
I think it depends on the aims this season. So for me personally now, I think top 4 is out of reach, personally. So then you look to the 6th or 5th, 6th and 7th. Now, can Newcastle's current squad, without any new signings, go from 9th to 6th or 7th? I think they can. I think because of next the 2024, the second half of the season, Newcastle will have less games. They will get more players back from injury, and I think that will benefit them. And I think on the day, as we talked about under Eddie Howe, the high intensity, the out-strengthened teams, out-battling teams, the out-working teams, I think they'll be able to do that more in the second half of the season. So do they need new signings to carry them from 9th to that top 7? I would argue not. But if you have genuine aims to try and push for that top 4 and go on an unbelievable run, like they did to go from 18th to 11th to when they stayed up, then you need probably 4 or 5 new signings. Now, are Newcastle going to do that next month? I'm very, 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 very doubtful. The term FFP is bandied about quite a lot, but can you get 4 or 5 quality players in January? Mid-season,
maybe, but
yeah, exactly. So is the quality out there? If it is, yeah, I think the club will find a way around FFP and bring the players in. But I think Eddie Howe quite rightly says that January is a difficult month because there's not many players out there to come in and improve this team. And if you want a player now, you're going to have to pay over the odds, extra premium on a quality player. Is it worth doing that in the context of the season now? As I say, yes, if you want to try and push the top 4, I think it's out of reach. But I think now to expect Newcastle to go from 9th into the top 7, I think can be done with this squad. But it all depends on the aims. It's probably one to post the guys who watch this. You guys out there watching, should Newcastle go out and spend big in January? I'll give my thoughts there. Dom, what would be your response to it?
I just think they need bodies, personally. Like, whether it's spending big or not, I'd get if you can be clever with the loan market, as Eddie Howe's alluded to previously. I just think a third choice striker. We saw on Boxing Day Newcastle getting rid of Chris Wood, while a good decision at the time, and I stand by that it was smart business by the club getting 15 million for a 31-year-old who basically didn't score goals and finally randomly started scoring goals on his return to St James's Park, but was a good piece of business, but failing to replace him wasn't. Whether you just get a young lad in, we're seeing a long-term target for Newcastle. João Pedro absolutely flying at Brighton, and a player like that would have been absolutely perfect to just ease the load on the likes of Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak, where basically, unless both players are fit and firing, both of them, if only one of them is, they seem to play not quite at full tilt, because it's so important that they don't get injured, because what else have you got in the team? So we saw last season when Alexander Isak and Callum Wilson were both fighting for that starting place, both of them played the best football, and then towards that middle period as well, they were both doing all right, scoring goals. Callum Wilson was coming off the bench, scoring goals earlier in the season. Alexander Isak was starting games, scoring goals, and we were talking, Alexander Isak, is he up there with Erling Haaland, sort of best young strikers in world football? And I think the difference between the two, I mean, Alexander Isak just in recent weeks seems to be playing at about 70%. He's been struggling with that groin injury. So yeah, I just think a striker, whether you spend a few £1 million or get a young lad from the Championship or another Premier League club, and just to ease that load and do a job, because ultimately the lads coming from the academy, with all due respect, probably need loan spells in the EFL before they're ready to start even playing games on a regular basis in the Premier League. And Anthony Gordon is being flogged at the moment, and Eddie Howe says he's a striker option, but in an ideal world he's not. So hopefully he can get back to full fitness and flourishing on that left wing as well. So yeah, I'd want Newcastle to bring in a few players just to bolster the bodies, really, more than anything. I don't think they need a massive injection of quality as such. The quality is there. I think it's more the tiredness, the fatigue, and almost the mental strain of having to play all these games in such quick succession. And maybe they do need one quality addition, but I wouldn't go out and spend £100 million like they did in Eddie Howe's first January transfer window.
Yeah, I mean, we all want to see the squad strengthen. I mean, if you're going to look at positions to strengthen in January, I would echo what you say about a centre forward or even a versatile forward who can play across the front three. You then probably do, if you look at the last two games and how Newcastle United have been stretched through the middle of the park, you probably do see you need an out-and-out number 6. Kalvin Phillips linked on that one, and then you probably need a centre half as well. But the point I'm trying to make is I think Newcastle United, with the less amount of games and the current squad they've got enough to go and finish in the top 6. If you want to try and push the top 4, I think they probably do need bits of quality. What I would say on that is, again, I go back to Anthony Gordon last January. If an opportunity of that like that comes up, say an opportunity to get a player of his quality in earlier ahead of the summer window where more teams might be interested, I'm sure Newcastle will do it. But as we stand here now, I'm not sure there is any opportunities out there for Newcastle. There probably is, we just don't know of them yet. But I mean, as I say, I think if you leave the squad as it is with less games, I still back them to finish in the top 6, 7. But yeah, I might have to eat my words on that one. But look, I'm not saying Newcastle shouldn't strengthen; they don't need to strengthen. In an ideal world, you would. I'm just not sure that the club are convinced that they need to do that in terms of achieve their aims this season. Which, again, I think it is to achieve European football again this season. Is the top 4 out of reach? I think it is. You guys might disagree. Dom, you might disagree. I think it is, but I think they do need an injection from somewhere. They do.
Eddie Howe will say it comes from within, but realistically, I think you're looking at players like, he's a bit of a scapegoat, but Miguel Almiron, they should have strengthened that right wing in the summer, and whether Harvey Barnes' injury has probably made him impacted the sort of winger options it probably has, where you could have played Anthony Gordon on either side or Harvey Barnes on either side and gave Miguel Almiron a rest. But a player who has so often shined under Eddie Howe, Almiron, he's been flogged and he just looks a million miles off at the moment.
They should have strengthened that position this summer. Yeah,
as do a couple others in terms of fitness. So I just think they need an injection from elsewhere. Whether that's just a 30 million, it's easier said than done, but just an Anthony Gordon type, just to someone ease that load, to give them something fresh in attack where it's becoming a little bit predictable. That would be my aim, because I think if they don't strengthen, if we're in the same position, more injuries will happen. They'll have a few players back, but the players to come back do they walk into the team half fit? Probably not. Joe Willock would get a game. He's been a big miss. Harvey Barnes would probably get a few games as well. Sandro Tonali's not going to come back, but then you're looking at Matt Targett, probably doesn't start games. Of course, these players ease the load, but then if you're getting injuries to players like Joe Linton, who we've had, and Alexander Isak, Callum Wilson, Bruno's not miles away from a 2-match suspension either. So yeah, you need players in to ease that load, and I think if Newcastle have a realistic aim of achieving European football, I think they do need to get the checkbook out in January. So I'm disagreeing with you.
There you go, Geordie Journo's disagreement.
Cracked badge.
Yes, cracked badge. No, I mean, I take your point as well, Dom. I want Newcastle to strengthen in January. They probably do need that injection of energy, but I don't think this squad and this manager goes bad or turn bad overnight. I think they need a bit more time to get things right. And I do think there's enough in there. I still think Newcastle are probably within the top, certainly within the top 7 best clubs in the Premier League. But yeah, I suppose a nice new winger would be nice. I take your point. Anything else to add, Dom?
No, moving on.
Bigger trip. Liverpool.
Can't wait.
Yes. Just we'll said at the start, a game that you don't really want on the back of a what word can you use? Dismal run. 6 defeats in 7 isn't great. Okay, there's
uncharacteristic.
Yes, uncharacteristic. There's mitigating circumstances, of course. But yeah, you don't want to go to Anfield. But yeah, Newcastle have got to do it. And look, what a statement of intent it would be if they can't actually bounce back. We're all talking outwardly here. If Newcastle can get a result at Anfield, that'll be a big statement and a big confidence booster.
Yeah, any result really. A draw would be a sort of turning of the tides to a degree.
Yeah. So yes, so we'll do the T's and C's. So
yeah, well, we won't be joined by Liam Kennedy at Anfield. How we get there is another question.
yeah, we're still deciding on that.
So yeah, no trains, things like that. So hopefully me and Jordan will be down there speaking more Geordie waffle at Anfield. And yeah, T's and C's, Jordan, you can take it away.
Okay.
For the final time in 2023.
Yeah, I'll show you back here actually. There's a bit of action going on over here. TV there. I think Craig Hope in the background there, I can hear him.
Aye, there he is.
Could you hear another voice? I think it's Keith Downey there from Sky Sports. Player must be up for interview. The lights came on, so
it's a big YouTube trio here.
It is.
I mean, if you can put us in that bracket.
Quartet, if you count bodies.
Yes.
But yeah, it looks like the players getting ready down to sit with Keith Downey, so we're probably wrapping this up at the right time. So yes, please like, comment, share and subscribe. Ring the bell, that's what Liam says.
Ring the bell.
For all your latest Geordie Journo's content. And yep, we'll see you at Anfield on New Year's Day.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.